Chapter 121. What an expression. Lin Feng didn't care about Duan Tianlang's facial expression and continued talking. Duan Tianlang, I really don't know if you are the one who chose the name, Holy Courtyard of Xue Yu, or if it was someone else. Of course, it is my idea, replied Duan Tianlang immediately. He wanted to kill Lin Feng. He was evilly staring at him. What a skillful manipulator, thought members of the crowd as they watched the scene unfold. Lin Feng had just said that the Holy Courtyard of Xue Yu didn't deserve such a name as it was recruiting rebels. Duan Tianlang was unable to refute Lin Feng's words, which obviously made the crowd agree with Lin Feng. Lin Feng had just asked him whose idea it was to call it the Holy Courtyard of Xue Yu. He obviously knew that Duan Tianlang would reply that it was his. Saying anything else would have been making the ones above him bear the responsibility for that, and he didn't dare to accuse them. Besides, Duan Tianlang had been unable to deny the fact that the courtyard didn't deserve its name, which meant that he was recognizing that Lin Feng was correct in what he was saying. He had no argument remaining to defend himself. That's the way it is. You, Duan Tianlang, convinced the biggest sects to hand over their best disciples to you and destroyed the Yun Hai sect, then finally created the Holy Courtyard of Xue Yu. How prestigious. But didn't you know that the Yun Hai sect was General Liu Kanglan's sect? Continued Lin Feng while Duan Tianlang remained uncommunicative. That was a very smart move from your part, Duan Tianlang, because Liu Kanglan was a disciple of the Yun Hai sect. Besides, everybody knows how kind and honest Liu Kanglan is. You knew that he would never tolerate your actions of destroying his sect. He would definitely come to you seeking revenge. That way, he would be forced to abandon his official functions and would come to the Imperial city to try and kill you. Then, you would be able to call him a rebel and damage his reputation and make him lose everything that he has built throughout the years. What a perfect plan. Your methods are absolutely perfect, but what was your agenda when you started to plot against one of the pillars supporting this country? Lin Feng was speaking uninterruptedly. Everybody was astonished by every single word that came from his mouth. That's right. What Lin Feng said was entirely true. That was a demonically perfect plan. However, at that moment, many people thought that Duan Tianlang probably wasn't the one at the origin of this plot. Everybody was shaking. They were moved by Lin Feng's words. After everything that Liu Kanglan had done for his country, who could have dared to plot against him? How tragic. Stop babbling nonsense. Shut up, shouted Duan Tianlang furiously. An ice-cold qi which smelt like death suddenly surrounded Lin Feng's body. Could it be that I am wrong? That you are not the author of all these horrors? Added Lin Feng, who seemed like hadn't noticed that Duan Tianlang wanted to kill him. Lin Feng's last remark shook up the crowd. Of course, it was me who was the origin of all of these events. Are you done talking now? Said Duan Tianlang unperturbedly, admitting that he was the one who had undertaken all of this. But could it be that the people in the shadows were actually the ones who had come up with the ideas first? However, there weren't many people above Duan Tianlang in the hierarchy of the country, so if he wasn't the one who had undertaken these horrors, who else could it be? Of course. I see. Since you admit that you are the who started all of this, I would like to ask you, since you plotted against General Liu Kanglan and also hurt and killed so many people of the Xue Yu country, are you not a rebel yourself? Is it not still considered a crime if a member of the Duan clan rebels? Asked Lin Feng. He glanced at Duan Tianlang and then at the crowd and said, and all of you who have helped him do evil, haven't you also committed a crime against the country too? The crowd was stunned. Lin Feng was using the arguments, which Duan Tianlang had used against Liu Kanglan, but this time they were directed against Duan Tianlang himself as well as the crowd. Lin Feng believed in justice and knew that he was right with what he was saying. Not the crowd or even Duan Tianlang could deny what Lin Feng was saying. Those who had committed crimes were accusing the innocent people of being guilty. Lin Feng had just brought about a radical change in the situation and was exposing the truth. His tongue was sharp as a sword. If it was another location, then Duan Tianlang would have killed Lin Feng without hesitation. But that was the inauguration day of the Holy Courtyard of Xue Yu in the Imperial city, so he had to be prudent and cautious about everything he did. People coming from everywhere in the country were paying attention to his words and behavior. He couldn't attack Liu Kanglan except if Liu Kanglan behaved like he did a moment before when he was ready to attack him. If Duan Tianlang took the initiative to attack, then that would definitely be a rebellion against the country. If Liu Kanglan took the initiative, then its blame would fall onto him. Why did you come to talk nonsense today? On the day of the inauguration ceremony? What evil intentions have brought you here? Duan Tianlang seemed like he had completely forgotten Lu Kanglan and was now getting excessively angry at Lin Feng. Besides, he had changed the subject completely. How am I causing trouble? I just spoke a few truths, that's all. If everybody thinks that everything that I said is unjustified and unreasonable, then I will leave, said Lin Feng. Actually, he had come to the holy courtyard of Xue Yu because he was really interested in disrupting the ceremony. Besides, he was hoping to be able to fight against some of its disciples for the sake of achieving enlightenment. But reality had been different because Lu Kanglan had appeared unexpectedly. How could Lin Feng let him carry out a suicide attack in the name of justice when his action would have had nothing to do with justice? Lin Feng found out that his words gave Duan Tianlang the impression that he was being slapped in the face. Lin Feng was quite satisfied even if he thought that it was not near enough punishment for him. General, in this world, justice can be protected if you are powerful, but, for that, you need to be alive. So please take care of yourself and at the right moment, you will be able to fight for justice, said Lin Feng to Lu Kanglan, who was surprised. Remember to keep growing stronger. Take care of yourself, only then you can fight for justice. Only those who could understand such things could be really free in the world. Lu Kanglan had come on that day to show that Duan Tianlang had unfairly destroyed the Yun Hai sect. Because of his past in the Yun Hai sect, he felt like he had to avenge it. He thought that it was the right thing to do. However, in Lin Feng's eyes, Lu Kanglan's behavior was just blind devotion and nothing more. If Lu Kanglan acted recklessly and caused his own death, then wouldn't that make the enemy happy? How could that avenge those who unfairly died at their hands? He was just acting like a desperate man with no other course of action. General, just leave, said Lin Feng. At that moment, Lu Kanglan slightly nodded. Would you like to come with me for a walk? Asked Lu Kanglan to Lin Feng. Lin Feng was surprised and then said, all right. After all the trouble you caused today, do you think that you can leave that easily? Said Duan Tianlang, who looked furious. They had humiliated him in the holy courtyard of Xue Yu. I'm taking him for a walk. Who will dare and oppose me? Said Lu Kanglan while glancing at Duan Tianlang. At that moment, Lu Kanglan looked like the real divine arrow Lu Kanglan. At the beginning, Lu Kanglan wanted to fight but hadn't yet initiated a full-blown conflict. Since Lu Kanglan wasn't provoking him anymore and hadn't committed any offense, Duan Tianlang couldn't do anything. Lu Kanglan, you came here without permission and on top of that caused trouble. Don't forget that these are serious offenses, said Duan Tianlang coldly. What makes you qualified to proclaim my faults? If His Majesty said that I had committed crimes and wanted to dismiss me, then I would accept his decision. You, however, are not qualified to speak against me, said Lu Kanglan indifferently. Duan Tianlang pulled a long face. Dismiss him? Lu Kanglan was a very famous general with a great history on the battlefield. He had accomplished many wonderful things for the country. Give him a Kai Shui horse, said Lu Kanglan to one of his troops to his side. Immediately after, a soldier jumped down from his horse and climbed onto the same horse as one of the other soldiers while Lin Feng took his horse. Let's go, said Lu Kanglan to Lin Feng. Lin Feng was sitting on the Kai Xie armored horse. Before leaving, he nodded at Meng Qing and the others. Lin Feng felt reassured because Meng Qing was there to protect them. At that moment, Lin Feng passed near Lin Ba Dao and Lin Rui. He looked at them through his bronze mask. They were surprised and didn't understand why that masked man was looking so deeply at them. But at that moment, Lin Feng and the other Kai Xie armored horses all left. Lin Ba Dao and Lin Rui, who were confused, just stared at these silhouettes while frowning. Their facial expression remained in an intense frown for a long time. End of chapter 121. Chapter 122, Xue Yu. The armored horses were galloping at great speed on an old and ancient road. At that moment, two horses were gradually slowing down. Lin Feng looked around. Milky white smoke could be seen coming from some chimneys in the distance. Surprisingly, they had come a small village. It wasn't that small either. In the continent of the Nine Clouds, cultivators were respected and had the power, but there were many ordinary people who didn't have a spirit and who couldn't practice cultivation. Lin Feng, we have arrived at the border region of Duanren City, said Lu Kanglan to Lin Feng, pointing at the city. We finally arrived, thought Lin Feng, seeing that they were getting closer and closer to the city. The Kai Xie armored horses were extremely fast, but as before, the Xue Yu country was still as vast as ever. Therefore, they had required 6 days to arrive in this city, which was situated in the north of the country. Duanren City. This road is weird. Everything is open and accessible. Anybody could attack and destroy it, said Lin Feng to Lu Kanglan. They don't even think about that, replied Lu Kanglan indifferently, which made Lin Feng shiver. They didn't think about that? In this city, it seemed like there were only ordinary people. They could easily be killed by even weak cultivators. Lin Feng, do you know how huge our continent is? I'm not sure, replied Lin Feng, shaking his head. The continent of the 9 clouds is extremely vast and has many countries. There is the Imperial country of Yu and our country, the Xue Yu country, which is inside Xue Yu, said Lu Kanglan slowly, and then continued, Xue Yu has 13 countries, amongst which 4 of them are extremely large. Lin Feng was stupefied. He had never heard of Xue Yu. 13 countries in the Xue Yu country was inside Xue Yu. Lin Feng didn't really understand what that meant. He didn't know what these territories looked like on a map. All of our countries are interconnected. There are agreements in place, and our Xue Yu country also respects these agreements. We wouldn't attack each other. However, in case that something like that happened, then the weak would probably become the prey of the strong. Being strong is one of the most important rules in the continent of the 9 clouds. However, every 10 years, the 13 countries choose the most outstanding disciples of their country and organize the Great Competition of Xue Yu. The Great Competition of Xue Yu consists of battles between these disciples. It is said that the winner can win an incredible amount of wealth and items. Besides, the winner has the opportunity to go to a mysterious and secret location to practice cultivation. The Great Competition of Xue Yu, a mysterious and secret location. Lin Feng was shivering. Maybe Luo Shui and Chu Zanpeng had joined the holy courtyard of Xue Yu for that exact reason. Lin Feng was wondering if there was a correlation between what Lu Kanglan was saying and the fact that these 2 high officials had chosen to study at the holy courtyard of Xue Yu. Nonetheless, there are some countries who wish they could become extremely strong and annex other territories. This is something that is made possible during the Great Competition of Xue Yu. Everything always comes down to power. If they manage to annex other territories, it means that they would gain power and have access to a greater number of outstanding talents. Many countries wish they could become the Imperial country. I see. Lin Feng would have never thought that countries would fight each other in the frame of a great competition. You should be able to understand now why they destroyed the Yun Hai sect. That is why they are trying to put all their best disciples into one place, the holy courtyard of Xue Yu, said Lu Kanglan. Lin Feng slightly nodded. They had built the holy courtyard of Xue Yu because they needed more outstanding disciples, and they needed to greatly increase the strength of the disciples in the country. They want to kill me because the sphere of influence of my army is too large. They destroyed the Yun Hai sect because they want to unify the country under one banner. The other sects have been magnanimous, but at some point, the Imperial clan will probably start paying more attention to them, and their fate will be the same as that of the Yun Hai sect, said Lu Kanglan while sighing. Lin Feng was feeling angrier and angrier. They definitely had their prey in sight. General, get down from your horses and come drink some water. At that moment, there were 2 people who had come from the village, and one of them was a woman. She was the one who had shouted these words to Lu Kanglan. General, your hair. No time. We are in a hurry. We cannot stop, replied Lu Kanglan to the woman while smiling. At that moment, many people were coming out of their houses and looking at Lu Kanglan. Their eyes were filled with respect and admiration. Lin Feng was looking at Lu Kanglan the same way. The masses had always feared the army, but these ordinary people were looking at Lu Kanglan with respect and affection. He had managed to win the hearts of the people. Lin Feng found it unfortunate that they weren't in the previous world. Lin Feng thought that a person like Lu Kanglan could have become one of the most important people in his previous world. He could probably achieve great things. At that moment, another small town appeared in front of Lin Feng. General, you came back. Quickly, open the gate. Many people, when they saw that Lu Kanglan had come back, looked excited. A short moment after, a multitude of people came to the gate. General, shouted the crowd loudly. They all knew that the Yun Hai sect had been destroyed and that their general had left to the Imperial city because of those events. They were terrified by the idea that their general would maybe never come back. They were thus very happy to see him return safely. When Lu Kanglan saw all those people, he took a few deep breaths. His heart was filled with joy. These people were his people, and their lives were in Lu Kanglan's hands. I came back, said Lu Kanglan. He then urged his horse onwards and galloped into the town at full speed. He was moving so fast that the wind around him created whistling sounds as he passed through the air. Lin Feng's Kai Xie armored horse was closely following Lu Kanglan. This town wasn't exactly big and was only a small part of the territory. Lu Kanglan lived in another region of the city near another gate. Lu Kanglan hadn't arrived yet, but there was a silhouette on a horse was coming towards him. She was urging on her horse forwards using a whip. She was wearing fire-red robes. Father. Lu Fei's eyes were red and full of tears. Not many people understood why he had gone to the Imperial city. Lu Fei didn't understand clearly either. When she heard that her father had come back, she rushed over to see him with tears in her eyes. Lu Fei was worried about her father and thought that he may not return alive. Fei, said Lu Kanglan. He seemed to be a very affectionate father as he's looking lovingly at his daughter. Lu Fei looked at her father and a few seconds later, said, Lu Kanglan, you're finally here. How could you be so stupid? A soldier next to Lin Feng was surprised and couldn't help letting his shock escape his mouth. Lu Fei was really rude. Immediately after, Lu Kanglan smiled in an even more affectionate way. It was a wry smile though. After all, he was indeed really stupid sometimes. Alright, Fei, I'm here. Are you not happy that I have returned? You are feeling happy that you have returned, but I am still not happy. She said, galloped towards her father and said, Father, promise me that you won't do something like this again in the future. I won't, said Lu Kanglan while shaking his head. He then pointed at Lin Feng and said, Fei, you can thank him. He's the one who saved your old father from making a mistake which he could not come back from. Lu Fei looked at Lin Feng. That young man's robes were full of dirt because of the long journey they had taken to get here. Besides, his bronze mask looked terribly evil the more that one looked at it. The qi emanating from his body was very strange as well. Father, who is this young man? Said Lu Fei while looking at Lin Feng with a perplexed face. Lu Kanglan laughed and said, Don't you recognize him? Lu Fei was stunned. Recognize him? She didn't know anyone who went around wearing a bronze mask. Lin Feng smiled and said as a joke, What? Can you not even recognize your boyfriend? When he finished talking, he took off his mask. When Lu Fei saw his face, her lips started to tremble. She was overwhelmed with all different kinds of emotions, but eventually a huge smile which was filled with warmth appeared and covered her face. End of chapter 122. Chapter 123, Duan Ren Border. Lin Feng, the one who was wearing that bronze mask, surprisingly was Lin Feng, and he was the person who had saved her father's life? Lu Kanglan looked at Lin Feng's face. He had met Lin Feng only twice and both times, he was wearing a bronze mask. It was the first time that he saw Lin Feng without his mask. He was smiling and seemed like a very good-natured person. Despite his age, he looked mysterious and mature. Only his mouth revealed a frivolous and unruly smile which showed that he probably had a good sense of humor as well. How young? Shouted Lu Kanglan stupefied and then whispered, How mysterious, he seems almost mystical. The first time Lu Kanglan had seen Lin Feng had pronounced a few deep and mysterious sentences which had deeply influenced his thoughts and opinions. The second time that he had met him, Lin Feng had fearlessly contradicted Duan Tianlang, leaving him dumbstruck and unable to reply. He had also damaged the reputation of the holy courtyard of Xue Yu. The one who had taken such brave actions inside the Imperial city was this smiling young man. These things didn't only require intelligence. They also required a person to be courageous, fearless and quite audacious to dare make Duan Tianlang lose face in front of so many people. It also required a person to be quite unconventional and unrestrained. Lu Kanglan would have never thought that such an extraordinary person could be so young. Lin Feng, you just said that you are Lu Fei's boyfriend. Suddenly said Lu Kanglan, recalling what Lin Feng had just said. He had a strange expression on his face and asked, Is it true? Lin Feng suddenly became very shy and scratched his head while remaining silent. Lu Fei was staring at him stunned. Father, don't listen to that bastard. He's just a despicable pervert. At that moment, she was angry at Lin Feng for having dared say that he was her boyfriend in front of her father. How embarrassing. The despicable pervert? Lin Feng looked very awkward after hearing such words. He then resolutely said to Lu Fei, Fei, are you not the one who asked me out and said that we were in a relationship in front of everyone the other day? If I'm a pervert, you are one as well. Lu Fei's eyes almost rolled. What a crazy bastard. Lu Kanglan's eyes were huge and wide open. He didn't understand what was going on at all. Lin Feng stared at Lu Fei's beautiful face, making her blush. Why had she started calling him a pervert again? While looking at both of them in such a strange situation, Liu Kanglan couldn't help but smile and said, Fei Fei, that's alright, I have seen enough. Let's go now. Lu Fei angrily looked at Lin Feng and then made her horse turn around. The three of them were riding their horses. Suddenly, many of the soldiers of Liu Kanglan's army, when they saw Lin Feng with the group, started to approach them. The crowd suddenly kneeled down and bowed to the extent that their heads made a loud thud when colliding with the solid ground. Lin Feng was astonished and found it very strange, especially that these people were not prostrating themselves in front of Liu Kanglan or Lu Fei but in front of him. Thank you for having saved our general's life. The people in the crowd were thanking Lin Feng one after another. Lin Feng was stupefied. Please stand up. There is no need to do such a thing, replied Lin Feng. These people were incredibly strong and had experienced many extraordinary things throughout their lifetime. How could they bow and worship Lin Feng? Young man, you didn't save only our general's life, but you also saved 200 Kai Xie armored cavalry soldiers. If our general died, our town would probably be in danger and might be invaded. It means that you saved and protected many people's lives with your actions, said a soldier looking solemn and grateful. Lin Feng was still surprised. He had never thought about these things. Oh, I see, but that's enough, please stand up now. Lin Feng wasn't an arrogant person, and everybody could see it. Everybody stood up when Lin Feng told them. They could see that he looked embarrassed from having so much attention on him. That's all right, everybody can disperse now, said Liu Kanglan while waving to everyone. Everybody then quietly left. Lin Feng, these people are not soldiers. They are officers. They are the best elements of my army. They can all lead groups of a few hundred people. I have only 500 officers. I trust them more than anyone else in the world. The soldiers who came with me to the Imperial city are all guards. You saved their lives. In the future, if there is an opportunity, they will be your assistants, said Liu Kanglan. Lin Feng was surprised and replied, My assistants? Indeed, your assistants, said Liu Kanglan honestly while nodding. He then added, You noticed that some people want to do me harm. At some point, they might succeed. If in the future you are also involved in these battles, then they will all come to help you. Lin Feng was smiling wryly. Who knew what would happen in the future? Lin Feng noticed the other gate of the town and sighed. They were in the very north of the country at the border with another country. If there was an attack someday, even if it wasn't supposed to happen, Liu Kanglan's territory would be the first one to be involved in battles. Fei Fei, you go first. Lin Feng and I are going on a walk, said Liu Kanglan to Lu Fei. Lu Fei was surprised and strangely stared at her father. All right, she said while nodding. She didn't ask her father for explanations and left. Lin Feng, let's walk to the gate, said Liu Kanglan while looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng was also surprised. He didn't know why Liu Kanglan wanted Lu Fei to leave them alone. All right, said Lin Feng while nodding. They galloped towards the western gate of the city. There were lots of troops in that area. Even though they were looking at Liu Kanglan, they didn't move away from their respective positions. They got down off their horses and Liu Kanglan then brought Lin Feng towards a flight of stairs on the left of the gate. The flight of stairs led to the gate tower, which was very large. They went up all the way to the top of the tower. Lin Feng suddenly just felt an extremely strong and cold wind blowing on his face. Lin Feng then looked at the landscape and was completely amazed. Duanren City, the city of 1,000 blades, thought Lin Feng. In front of him was a vast field which looked boundless. There was a myriad of bladed weapons lying on the ground. Some of these weapons were already completely rusted and worn down over time. Since the battle, I have never given the order to remove these weapons from their positions. I rather prefer leaving them there in remembrance of those heroic souls, said Liu Kanglan slowly. He pointed his finger at the distance. It looked like a gigantic sword had cut a mountain into two. It strangely resembled the mountain where he could see sunlight shining in the Yunhai sect, the place where Lu Fei used to practice cultivation. That place was surrounded by a moat. As that natural moat was surrounded by high hills, it was easier for Liu Kanglan's troops to shoot at people who would try and come from that location. They were extremely vulnerable if they came from that location. That place is the border. If you were to go there, then there is a good chance that you will not make it back alive. It's called Duanren border. Duanren border, logical, whispered Lin Feng. This is the border with the Mo Yu country. The Mo Yu country and our Xue Yu country are very different. In the Mo Yu country, they don't have sects and they are completely united. Therefore, they are much stronger than us as they have a combined power. They have a huge army which is under a single banner. If they weren't scared of my army in Duanren City, They probably would have attacked a long time ago, said Lu Kanglan. That is why, Lu Kanglan, a long time ago had spared no effort and had fearlessly led his army into great battles. He had emerged victorious and created a legend which brought fear to his enemies. Lin Feng, you saw how dangerous the situation is for me. Someday, I will probably have my life taken from me, and I'm not speaking carelessly when I say this. Lin Feng understood why Lu Kanglan had abandoned the Yun Hai sect in the past. He had left everything behind to protect his country from invaders. In the Xue Yu country, there were internal and external threats. The situation was extremely complex. Lin Feng, there is something that I would like to ask you. Lin Feng was stupefied. He was staring at Lu Kanglan. What could Lu Kanglan have to ask from him? Lu Kanglan slowly said, please take good care of Fei Fei. End of chapter 123. Chapter 124, Heartless Imperial Family. Take care of Lu Fei? Lin Feng first blankly stared at Lu Kanglan and then smiled wryly. It wasn't that easy to take care of Lu Fei. If only Lu Fei was similar to Meng Qing, but at that moment, Lin Feng was living with Meng Qing. What about Lu Fei? That was a difficult situation for Lin Feng. He didn't know what to do. Besides, Meng Qing wanted to take care of him and wanted for him to tell her stories all the time. Uncle Lu Kanglan, why do you trust me? When the Yun Hai sect was destroyed, they all sacrificed their lives to protect you. If I can't trust you, then there is nobody in this world that I can trust, said Lu Kanglan while fixedly staring at Lin Feng. He then smiled and said, besides, I think that Fei Fei and you are a very good match. If you want to take care of her forever, I have no objection to your union. Lin Feng was really stunned. Lu Kanglan was surprisingly trying to make Lin Feng and Lu Fei become engaged. Because of her incredible beauty, this offer would be hard to resist for any ordinary man. Of course, Lin Feng wasn't an ordinary man. Uncle Lu Kanglan, I am not that kind of person, but I have listened to what you have to say and I can promise you that I will do my best to take good care of her, replied Lin Feng in a low voice. Lu Kanglan smiled. He liked Lin Feng. He then said, I understand. I know that you are not that kind of person. Lin Feng, it is Lu Fei who expressed this. When Lin Feng heard Lu Kanglan's ambiguous words, he felt like crawling into a hole and disappearing from the world. He was extremely embarrassed. Maybe Lu Kanglan thought that what Lin Feng had meant when he said he was not that kind of person was that he wasn't a talented enough when it came to women, but Lu Kanglan found it strange. But did Lin Feng have a choice? If he refused Lu Kanglan's offer, it would be too suspicious when Lu Fei had heard her father tell her that he wanted to spend some time alone with Lin Feng. She felt incredibly furious in her heart. At that moment, Lin Feng and Lu Fei were in her house. Lu Fei angrily looked at Lin Feng and said, what did you tell my father? She remembered that Lin Feng had said that he was her boyfriend in front of her father. It was very possible that her father had misunderstood Lin Feng. At that moment, Lu Kanglan had asked Lu Fei to leave with Lin Feng without asking for her opinion and gave her no chance to respond. Poor Lin Feng. He didn't want to argue. He was just smiling wryly. Father, I'm not leaving, said Lu Fei while shaking her head and looking at her father. Don't make trouble, Fei Fei. I have made this decision and I will not change my mind. I told Lin Feng to stay in Duanren City for 3 days. 3 days from now, you will both leave together, said Lu Kanglan strictly. He was extremely firm and strict with his words. Father, shouted Lu Fei, who wanted to say something else but was interrupted by Lu Kanglan. No, you have nothing to add. I am your father, and you will listen to me. Lu Fei was shaking while staring at her father, which made Lu Kanglan want to take back his words and give her a choice, but he was convinced that Lu Fei had to leave, so he did not take back his words and stayed silent. I'm sorry. I will not disobey. Lu Fei didn't say anything else and ran towards her room with a bright red face. When Lu Kanglan saw Lu Fei run like this, he felt powerless. Lin Feng felt powerless as well. Because of all the problems Lu Kanglan had, he would constantly be worried to death if Lu Fei stayed. Some people are really heartless, thought Lin Feng. 3 days later, dust rose all around the galloping horses. Several hundreds of Kaixie armored horses were galloping on that ancient road. Uncle Lu Kanglan, you can accompany us to here, we should be fine from this point on, said Lin Feng to Lu Kanglan. Their horses gradually slowed down and stopped. Lu Kanglan looked at Lu Fei. He looked reluctant to part with them. He also didn't know when they would meet again. Father, you can go back now, said Lu Fei reluctantly. She was gritting her teeth. Fei Fei, please listen to Lin Feng. said Lu Kanglan while strictly staring at Lu Fei. Even though Lu Kanglan hadn't known Lin Feng for a long time, he knew that Lin Feng was extremely strong. He felt reassured to know that Lin Feng was there to take care of Lu Fei. Lu Fei glanced at Lin Feng, nodded and said, "Father, I will." "Take care of yourself," said Lu Kanglan while turning around and galloping away. "Lin Feng, please take good care of her," shouted Lu Kanglan from far away. "Sister, have a safe trip. Brother, have a safe trip." The cavalry on their Kai-Xie armored horses shouted these words to Lu Fei and Lin Feng and left by following Lu Kanglan. Lu Fei stared at them for a while, motionless. Lin Feng stayed next to her and remained silent. "Yesterday, my father told me that he had abandoned the Yunhai sect in the past even though they had taught him so much. He thinks that he is responsible for the destruction of the Yunhai sect. He feels endless regret in his heart about the events which occurred. My father also told me that during the great battle against Duan Ren border, my mother had been killed. He hadn't even talked to her before she was killed. He feels extremely guilty. My father also said that because of the issues with the Duan Ren border, he hadn't had time to take care of me, which is why he had sent me to the Yunhai sect. Because he didn't assume his responsibilities as a father, he also said sorry to me, his daughter. My father also said that during the war of the Duan Ren border, he had lost many of his troops, 100,000 or more. They are buried outside of Duan Ren city and he is still alive. He feels regret in his heart that he could not save any of them." Lin Feng was calmly listening to Lu Fei. He found all these stories extremely complex. "I know why my father wants me to leave. He doesn't want me to get involved. He feels sorry and regrets many things, but one thing I know is that the Xue Yu country should feel regret for what they did and are doing to him. They are the ones who should say sorry to him." Lin Feng raised his head and looked at the sky while listening to Lu Fei. Even if the Xue Yu country said sorry to him, that would never be enough. If Lin Feng was strong enough, he would go to the Imperial city and ask the Imperial clan how they feel about it. He was really curious to know how these people really felt from the bottom of their hearts. Only those who were strong enough could influence others. In that world, if someone was strong enough, he could destroy an entire country with a wave of his hand, and no one would stand against him. Lin Feng would never understand why strength was so important in this land. "If you want to cry, then you can go ahead. It's okay," said Lin Feng to Lu Fei in a soft and affectionate voice. Lu Fei had too much pressure. What a pity for such a beautiful 16-year-old girl. When Lu Fei heard Lin Feng's words, tears started unceasingly flowing along her beautiful soft cheeks. Suddenly, she started sobbing loudly. She was shaking. She could barely breathe from all the tears that endlessly fell from her eyes. Lin Feng smiled wryly. Girls were all the same. Enough pressure would make them cry even though they tried to hide it. Lin Feng made his horse go next to Lu Fei's one and put his hand on her shoulder. He then jumped down from his horse onto Lu Fei's horse and said, "It's okay, you can wipe your tears on me." Lu Fei turned around, looked at Lin Feng with her eyes full of tears and then pushed her face into his chest while sobbing in his arms. A while after, Lu Fei calmed down. She looked at Lin Feng and said, "You're a real pervert. You're taking advantage of the situation." Lin Feng was stupefied. "What a moody girl. It seems like someone is in love with me," said Lin Feng. Lu Fei looked at him and said, "Get over yourself. You like manipulating people, don't you?" said Lin Feng while laughing. He then jumped back onto his Kai-Xue armored horse. Lu Fei still had tears in her eyes and her face was red, but she didn't want Lin Feng to see her. "Let's go," said Lu Fei to Lin Feng. The Kai-Xie armored horses immediately left as if they were able to understand the ones riding them. They left at full speed. Lin Feng smiled. Making Lu Fei listen to him was going to be such a difficult task. On the old and ancient road, a picturesque scene unfurled of a young handsome boy and an extremely beautiful young girl galloping on their horses, swiftly into the horizon. End of chapter 124. Chapter 125. When they met. Outside of the Celestial Academy, two horses had appeared. At that moment, the recruitment procedure had already finished. A crowd formed and started getting bigger and bigger. People were staring at these two Kai-Xie armored horses and the two people who were on top of them. They were particularly interested in Lu Fei. "The Celestial Academy," said Lu Fei looking at the large gate. She then asked Lin Feng, "Why the hell did you bring me here?" "To practice cultivation, obviously," replied Lin Feng and then added, "Let's go inside. I don't have a recommendation letter, besides, I will not join the Celestial Academy," said Lu Fei and then continued, "And you shouldn't either, are you forgetting about the Yunhai sect? Lu Fei was Lu Kanglan's daughter, so she obviously knew about the Celestial Academy. I haven't joined it either, and I can bring you in without a letter of recommendation, said Lin Feng while shaking his head. He knew what Lu Fei meant. After so many people had sacrificed their lives to save him, including some elders, studying in another place would be a kind of betrayal to the Yun Hai sect. Don't forget that your father told you to listen to me, said Lin Feng. When he saw that Lu Fei wasn't reacting, he urged the horse forwards and went into the academy. Lu Fei looked at Lin Feng's silhouette and then galloped behind him. She was shocked by the fact that nobody prevented her from entering in the academy. How did you do that? Asked Lu Fei. She clearly knew that the academy didn't allow anybody to penetrate into the territory of the academy. She didn't know why they would make an exception for her. How could it be that easy to enter? The only explanation was Lin Feng. Besides, he had said it himself a moment before, that she didn't need a letter of recommendation to enter. Well, it's nothing extraordinary considering who my girlfriend is, Lin Feng said with a smile. Lu Fei angrily stared at him. What are you looking like that for? I didn't say that you're my girlfriend. I'm sorry, but it seems like your love for me is not reciprocated, said Lin Feng while arrogantly looking at Lu Fei. That girl thought too much. When she heard Lin Feng's words, she started shaking in anger. That damn bastard. It was the first time that Lu Fei went to the Celestial Academy. She found that the scenery was majestic and imposing. Lin Feng and Lu Fei had arrived outside of the palace where the students' rooms were located. He looked at Lu Fei and asked, I guess you already know about the 3 different categories of cultivators that are studying at the academy. I know that it produced army officers, government officials and assassins. In Duanren City, my father's army is composed of many people who studied at the Celestial Academy. They are all very strong individuals. Many cultivators who studied here became strong Kai Xie protectors. Lin Feng looked surprised, looked at Lu Fei and said, Kai Xie protectors? Uncle Lu lets them become protectors that easily? The Kai Xie protectors were Lu Kanglan's closest troops. Besides, Lin Feng had asked himself before about the status of the people who graduated from the Celestial Academy. If they could become such prestigious cultivators, didn't it mean that the Imperial City had to be supporting it? Lu Fei was looking at Lin Feng as if she was looking at an idiot. Do you think that my father is that kind of person? Lin Feng smiled wryly. Indeed. Lu Kanglan could easily recognize people with high abilities. He wouldn't let anyone become a Kai Xie protector. Here is the place where those who study military skills stay. Even though we are not students of the academy, we have the right to live here. We can study about military skills and techniques. Lu Fei was astonished. She was really wondering how Lin Feng had achieved such a thing. She had asked him already, but he didn't reply. She didn't feel like asking him again, so she just nodded her head. When they arrived in Lin Feng's living quarters, Yuan Shan and Duan Feng were chatting. When they saw Lin Feng and Lu Fei, they were pleasantly surprised. Lin Feng, big brother. Lin Feng, my friend. The two of them happily said Lin Feng's name in unison. Immediately after, they looked at Lu Fei. Yuan Shan looked at Lu Fei in an ambiguous way. Lin Feng, big brother. Who is she? Asked Duan Feng while looking at Lu Fei in such a way that gave the impression he was worshipping her. Meng Qing and Lin Feng had already decided to live together. How could Lin Feng go out and come back with a new amazingly beautiful girl? Lu Fei, said a voice behind Duan Feng. Jing Yun walked towards them. When she saw that Lin Feng and Lu Fei were together, she made a strange face. In the Yun Hai sect, Lu Fei was considered as the most beautiful girl. A countless number of men were courting her. Since the Yun Hai sect had been destroyed, Jing Yun had thought that Lu Fei had died like the others. She wouldn't have thought she would see her again, especially with Lin Feng. Besides, on that day at the holy courtyard of Xue Yu, hadn't Lin Feng left with Lu Kanglan? Lu Fei, the girl who possesses the divine arrow spirit, said Lin Feng. Duan Feng and Yuan Shan were stunned. That exceptionally beautiful girl was Lu Kanglan's daughter. No wonder Lin Feng was with her. Jing Yun was even more astonished. She didn't know that she was Lu Kanglan's daughter until that moment. Hello, said Yuan Shan, whose expression had slightly changed. His eyes were suddenly filled with respect. Lu Kanglan was one of the people whom Yuan Shan respected the most. Too bad that on the other day, he had only seen him from far away and hadn't been able to talk to him. He wished he could have followed Lin Feng and Lu Kanglan. Yuan Shan wasn't the only person who was like that. Many disciples who were studying military skills also idolized Lu Kanglan. Who was a great general? Who could kill people from very far away with incredible accuracy using his arrows? Liu Kanglan. Many boys were very excited even if they only heard Liu Kanglan's name. And Liu Fei was his daughter. When Liu Fei noticed Yuan Shan's fanaticism, her heart was filled with sorrow. Everybody knew how heroic and great Liu Kanglan was, but nobody knew how difficult the situation was for him. Nobody knew that some people in the country wanted to eliminate him and take all of the power for themselves. Lin Feng, I would like to rest, said Liu Fei calmly. Lin Feng sighed. He noticed that Liu Fei hadn't completely recovered. Here, or do you want to choose your own place? There are many free apartments. Choose one for yourself, said Lin Feng. No need. I'm going to rest in your room, said Liu Fei calmly. Everyone was stunned. Lin Feng was even more stupefied. He was speechless. At that moment, he thought that the most complicated thing to understand in the world was women's logic. Lin Feng scratched his head and said, "It's not very convenient. You should definitely find your own place. Don't worry, I don't mind." "Why would you?" said Liu Fei and continued, "Where is your place?" "That one," said Lin Feng, who had no alternative while pointing towards his own room. At that moment, Yuan Shan quickly moved in front of Lin Feng's door and said while shaking his head, "You should choose another place." When Lin Feng saw that Yuan Shan was obstructing the way to his room, he was surprised. Everybody had a suspicious expression on their face. Then, Duan Feng and Jing Yun nodded their heads, indicating that they didn't approve Liu Fei staying in Lin Feng's room either. Nothing worked though. They hadn't managed to convince Liu Fei. "No need. I'll rest here." Liu Fei moved closer to Yuan Shan. Yuan Shan then said, "Lin Feng, my friend, you should get in there first." "Alright," nodded Lin Feng. He moved towards the big stone door, opened it and entered his room. Liu Fei followed him. "Who's that? What a terrifying strength," thought Lin Feng. At that moment, an extremely strong qi came out and crashed onto Lin Feng's body. He almost fell down. At that moment, Lin Feng understood why Yuan Shan had told him to enter first. "How kind." "It's me," shouted Lin Feng. Suddenly, the qi disappeared. Liu Fei was standing behind Lin Feng and shaking from head to toe. That oppressive qi a moment ago had almost made her collapse. What a powerful strength. Yuan Shan was outside of the room and had a wry smile on his face. Fortunately, he had asked Lin Feng to enter first. That rumbling sound emitted by the release of that strong qi had resonated in the entire palace. His heart was still fluttering with fear. That girl was terrifyingly strong. "How come you didn't come back earlier?" asked Meng Qing coldly from the back of the room. Meng Qing was still wearing a fine veil on her face as well as her beautiful white robes. She looked so divine, as if she was above the material things of this world. She still looked extremely beautiful. When Liu Fei saw Meng Qing, it seemed her eyes were about to pop from their sockets. At the same time, when Meng Qing saw Liu Fei, her eyes shook for a second and suddenly her eyebrows seemed to indicate that she was extremely unhappy. End of chapter 125. You are listening to Peerless Martial God audio on Light Novel Aloud. Chapter 126, Meng Qing's Pain. But very quickly, Meng Qing stopped looking at Liu Fei and calmly looked at Lin Feng. Right after that, she went into a small room of the living quarters and closed the door. Meng Qing's reaction made Lin Feng smile wryly. From Meng Qing's cold and detached reaction, Lin Feng couldn't guess what she was thinking. He had no idea what she was feeling in her heart. "Lin Feng, you're a real bastard." Liu Fei was biting on her lips and looked at Lin Feng with her eyes filled with sadness. She then immediately left the living quarters. Lin Feng was puzzled. Millions of questions passed through his mind. Wasn't she a bit moody? How could she look at him with such eyes? She looked completely heartbroken. Could it be that she really liked him? Lin Feng was lost and didn't understand anything anymore, so he was just smiling wryly. Women's hearts were really incomprehensible for him. Of course, Lin Feng didn't understand Liu Fei's inner thoughts. When Liu Kanglan had asked Lin Feng to take of Liu Fei, his purpose was to make them more intimate by spending longer periods of time with each other. Liu Kanglan didn't know how long he would be able to stay alive. He was in great danger after all. The only person Liu Fei could rely on if he died was Lin Feng. Even though they didn't like each other at the beginning because of a few misunderstandings, afterwards Lin Feng had shown that he was the kind of person that she could believe in. He had displayed outstanding physical abilities and was very enlightened on spiritual matters. While getting to know Lin Feng, Liu Fei had gradually forgotten about all of the bad things she thought about Lin Feng originally. Especially, when he left the Yun Hai sect on the day of the bloodbath, She only thought positive things about Lin Feng. Lu Fei already had feelings for Lin Feng, which is why she had accepted to listen to her father and follow Lin Feng. Besides, deep in her heart, she was starting to get used to being together with Lin Feng. Therefore, she found it very normal to live alone with Lin Feng. But when Lu Fei opened the door of Lin Feng's living quarters, the first thing she was a girl, and on top of that, an incredibly beautiful girl. She felt like her heart was broken, which is why she had rushed out of the living quarters. She couldn't stand it any longer. Lin Feng, whom are you going to comfort first? The one inside? Or are you going to chase the other one outside? Asked Yuan Shan, who was standing outside. Lin Feng frowned after hearing his words. I should go and talk to Lu Fei first, thought Lin Feng. Lu Fei was still particularly vulnerable because of all the things that had happened, including those with her father. Lin Feng was really worried about her. Lin Feng went out, jumped through the air and tried to catch up with Lu Fei. She was heading towards the exit. She seemed like she was really angry and wasn't even saying a word. Lin Feng followed her and finally caught up with her. At that moment, they were already outside of the ancient palace. Why are you doing this to me? Asked Lu Fei to Lin Feng. She looked at him with an ice-cold glare. Lin Feng clearly noticed that she was jealous. Lin Feng was feeling weird deep in his heart. He had never felt in love during his lifetime, so he didn't know what it felt like, but at that moment, delicate and subtle emotions filled his heart. Lin Feng remained speechless and was just fixedly staring at Lu Fei while walking with her. I asked you a question, said Lu Fei, glaring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng was still staring at her. Lu Fei was stupefied. What the hell was he looking at? Do you like me? Said Lin Feng in a small and weak voice while scratching his head. Lu Fei was startled with surprise and almost fell down. She turned around, blinked and looked at Lin Feng. Suddenly, she started laughing loudly. Me? Like you? In your dreams, replied Lu Fei coldly. She then turned around and walked at a faster pace. She had never had such feelings and emotions before. Her heart was pounding extremely fast. Really? Said Lin Feng, surprised. Could it be that he had just imagined it? Lu Fei, stop walking away please, shouted Lin Feng to Lu Fei, who was moving farther and farther away. Lu Fei suddenly stopped walking. Don't forget what you promised to your father. You must listen to me, said Lin Feng impolitely. Lu Fei obviously found it hard to turn around. She gnashed her teeth while furiously looking at Lin Feng. That bastard was using her promise to her dad as an excuse. But at that moment, Lin Feng walked up to her. When he arrived next to her, his hand grabbed Lu Fei's hand and he said, let's go back, alright? Lin Feng was holding her hand so tightly that she couldn't get away from him. That bastard was using strength against her. As she couldn't break her hand free from his, she just angrily glared at him. Relax now. Lin Feng was proud of himself. Coping with women wasn't an easy thing, but Lu Fei was being docile at that moment. Of course, he wouldn't be able to do the same thing with Meng Qing. If he tried to use force against her, she would probably attack him and in the blink of an eye he would be sent flying. A short time after, Yuan Shan and Duan Feng saw Lin Feng and Lu Fei coming back hand in hand. When they saw that Lu Fei wasn't struggling and was holding his hand too, they were astonished. They looked at Lin Feng in a way which looked like they were worshipping his prowess with women. What a truly talented young man. There are many rooms in my living quarters, you can choose one and stay there. If you don't agree, you can live with Jing Yun, said Lin Feng, releasing Lu Fei's hand. Who would want to live in the living quarters of a bastard like you? Said Lu Fei, looking at Lin Feng with cruel eyes. Lin Feng suddenly felt relieved though and had the feeling that Lu Fei had returned to her usual self. Uncle Lu had asked him to take care of her. It seemed like better days would be in the future because today he felt terrible. Lin Feng shook his head and went back into his apartment. He moved towards the room in which Meng Qing was and softly knocked at her door. There was no reply for a few seconds and then Lin Feng heard Meng Qing's voice from behind the door say, I want to have a rest. Go and have fun with her. Lin Feng was smiling wryly. Could it be that the divine and spiritual Meng Qing was jealous? But Lin Feng quickly refuted the idea that she could be jealous. Meng Qing always gave the impression that she had a stone-cold heart. Lin Feng never knew what she was thinking. I said that I wanted to rest. Leave now, shouted Meng Qing from inside the room. Lin Feng was stupefied. What was going on? What was wrong with her? Meng Qing had always sounded cold and detached. Her mood seemed to never really change, but at that moment, she almost sounded angry. Meng Qing, said Lin Feng again, but Meng Qing immediately interrupted him and said, go away. Something was wrong. A light twinkled in Lin Feng's eyes. There was obviously something wrong. Lin Feng resolutely pushed the door of her room, but it didn't open. It seemed to be locked from inside. Lin Feng pushed the door with all his strength and eventually managed to open it. He then immediately entered the room. Lin Feng just felt an extremely strong and cold qi starting to oppress his body. How scary. The scariest was that qi filled the entire room. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He glanced at the room and then at the simple bed. Meng Qing was sitting on her bed. Lin Feng was stunned when he saw her. Meng Qing was shivering, and her body was covered with a layer of frost. Meng Qing's beautiful hair was entirely white as it was covered with frost. "What's wrong?" cried out Lin Feng in alarm. Meng Qing raised her head. Maybe that she was just too cold from the frost. She moved her lips, but no words came out of her mouth. "Meng Qing, are you alright? Tell me what's wrong," said Lin Feng while walking towards the bed. Lin Feng felt even colder as if his entire body was going to freeze. It was too cold, but the coldness didn't come from outside, it came from Meng Qing's body. "Go away. Don't come here," said Meng Qing with a shaking voice. Lin Feng sensed a strong pain in her words. He recalled the strong and cold qi that had fallen onto his body a moment before when he had entered the room. At that moment, Meng Qing's body was releasing some ice-cold qi, but as always, she was trying to act as if nothing had happened. Meng Qing didn't want to tell Lin Feng what was going on. Lin Feng took a few steps towards her bed and finally reached the edge of it. Suddenly, frost started spreading from his hands and started to cover his whole body. In the blink of an eye, he looked exactly like Meng Qing, covered with frost. He had also started to shiver. But he looked determined as ever. End of chapter 126. Chapter 127. The snake is back. Lin Feng was getting closer and closer to Meng Qing. As he was getting nearer, he also felt a more extreme amount of cold piercing through his body. At some point, he wanted to touch her shoulder with his hand and realized that his fingers were completely frozen. He couldn't move them anymore. "Leave," said Meng Qing with a hoarse voice. After a short time, her body stopped releasing a cold qi. She couldn't stand seeing Lin Feng like that. It made her feel sad deep in her heart. "You silly girl. Every time, you're the one who protects me. I lose face each time," said Lin Feng while smiling. His eyebrows were completely white. At that moment, a pure qi landed on his body and suddenly, he didn't feel so cold anymore. The frost also instantly vanished. Lin Feng then moved closer to Meng Qing. Meng Qing saw that Lin Feng had a smile on his face even when he was starting to freeze over from head to toe. That smile remained on his face and he continued to smile warmly at her. "I hope you won't blame me," said Lin Feng while smiling. He then stretched his arms towards Meng Qing and tried to hug her. Suddenly, he felt a piercing coldness invade his body and in the blink of an eye, he was completely frozen once again. Meng Qing's body looked it was frozen solid in ice. This type of cold could make people suffocate from the piercing sting on the lungs. It was incredibly hard to breathe. Suddenly, a stone appeared around Lin Feng's body. In that stone, there were all the things that were contained within the temple of the Yun Hai sect. Lin Feng's eyes were closed. He released his spirit and suddenly, the world which appeared around him wasn't dark as it used to be, it was entirely white covered with snow and it was also extremely cold. Swallow. Lin Feng, after releasing his celestial spirit, started absorbing and swallowing the pure qi of the purity stone. He was both exhaling and inhaling the pure qi at the same time, which was one of the abilities his celestial spirit provided. Meng Qing blinked and attentively looked at Lin Feng's delicate and beautiful face. She wasn't moving anymore either. She was just staring at Lin Feng's closed eyes while still releasing cold qi which was immediately crashing onto Lin Feng's body. It seemed like time had stopped. The ice on Lin Feng's body was getting thicker and thicker. Half of his body was already completely rigid because of the ice. His breath was also slower and slower. Besides, more than half of the pure qi of his purity stone had already been consumed. Even in that situation, Lin Feng was aware that his body was becoming colder and colder and that the ice covering his body was getting thicker and thicker. He was also aware of the fact that the pure qi of the purity stone wasn't sufficient to help him break through. He suddenly couldn't do anything anymore and just let the ice invade his body. At that moment, Meng Qing stopped releasing cold qi. Her entire body snuggled against Lin Feng. At that moment, she didn't look like an ice-cold divine goddess anymore. She looked like a pitiful young girl who was consumed with sadness. How cold. At that moment, Lin Feng felt like he couldn't resist the coldness anymore. It seemed like the ice was about to freeze his muscles and blood. He was frozen stiff from the cold chi which had pierced his entire body. I cannot give up, I have to persevere. But willpower and determination weren't enough. Lin Feng was frozen stiff and unable to move, no matter how hard he tried. He was shivering from head to toe and his teeth were chattering from the cold. The coldness was starting to penetrate into Lin Feng's blood, but at that moment, his soul started vibrating. He was suddenly filled with a very familiar sensation. That's my spirit. My snake spirit. Lin Feng's heart was pounding. The sensation he had at that moment was the same as when he had almost been killed by the imaginary demon. My snake spirit has woken up. Lin Feng heard his snake spirit hiss. It then opened its huge mouth and started uninterruptedly swallowing cold chi. Oddly enough, my snake spirit is also able to swallow that ice-cold chi. Lin Feng's heart was pounding. His pupils shrank as he watched his snake spirit swallow unimaginable quantities of cold chi. That was a scary thing to watch. The cold chi which filled the entire room was being swallowed by the snake. The room was becoming less and less cold with each passing moment. An illusionary group of icicles suddenly appeared behind Lin Feng. It was extremely powerful and cold, but it couldn't affect either Lin Feng or Meng Qing because Lin Feng could control it. An ice spirit replaced my imaginary demon spirit? Lin Feng opened his mouth. He was completely stunned after noticing the change. It was just like the last time when he was in danger. After his snake spirit had finished eating, whatever it ate would appear behind Lin Feng and become an additional spirit. Last time, the imaginary demon spirit had appeared behind Lin Feng because his snake spirit had swallowed it. This time, it had swallowed large amounts of ice chi and a new ice spirit appeared behind his back, replacing the imaginary demon spirit. Lin Feng's snake spirit was so incredible that it made him scared. Lin Feng's snake spirit had almost finished swallowing the entirety of the cold chi within the atmosphere. His ice spirit was becoming much stronger and colder. The more chi which was swallowed, the stronger the spirit was becoming. Besides, his snake was growing bigger and bigger as it swallowed the cold chi. Finally, the cold chi completely disappeared from the room. At that moment, the ice had even disappeared from Meng Qing's body. No ice was being released by her body any longer. It had even started to get warm in the room. Suddenly, she closed her eyes and fell asleep. She needed to rest. She was emotionally exhausted after such events. At that moment, Lin Feng looked at the sleeping beauty. A big smile appeared on Lin Feng's face and his heart started beating faster. I became stronger yet again. Lin Feng was able to detect that he had become stronger, which made him smile. Even though he had been able to survive by the skin of his teeth, he felt very satisfied. Lin Feng didn't bother Meng Qing. He closed his eyes and started meditating. Deep in meditation, Lin Feng realized that his strength was still insufficient. He needed to increase his practice and grow stronger faster. He had not spent enough time increasing his strength in the past days. There were many other countries in the continent and many other outstanding cultivators. If he did not work hard, then he would fall behind. Not aware of how much time had passed, Meng Qing's hand started moving. She slowly opened her eyes and saw that the cold chi had completely disappeared from the room. Besides, her head was still against Lin Feng's comfortable and warm body. She then blinked twice. She looked perplexed at how such a situation had come about. She immediately sat up and saw that Lin Feng's eyes were closed and that he was meditating. She was surprised. Lin Feng had felt something change within the room. He stopped meditating and opened his eyes. He looked at Meng Qing in a tender way and smiled. You have finally woken up. Yes, nodded Meng Qing. She looked at Lin Feng and asked, looking dumbstruck, how did you do that? I had a beautiful girl against me, so I forgot about the coldness. Then, I ended up like this, said Lin Feng while smiling. She looked at Lin Feng but wasn't sure how to interpret what he meant. These easily said words still made her feel slightly better though. Even if she hadn't used all her strength when releasing that terrifyingly cold chi, Lin Feng was able to resist to such an attack. It was impossible, but he had still done it, so how was that possible? Even though Lin Feng didn't tell her, she quickly stopped asking herself that question and said to Lin Feng, what do you think you are doing still sitting here? Said Lin Feng while blinking. Was every woman like this? Aggressive to the ones that they care about? I am worried about you, so I want to be here in case you needed me, replied Lin Feng in a low voice. Now, there is no ice in my body anymore. How long do you plan to continue hugging me? Asked Meng Qing, fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Her voice sounded cold and indifferent again. Lin Feng frowned. He then immediately stood up and left her room. That girl was way too smart. What Lin Feng didn't see because he had left her room already is that Meng Qing was blushing. At that moment, anyone who would have seen her would have been astonished to see her face was bright red. End of chapter 127. Chapter 128, Purity Stones. In the middle of the ancient palace where the students lived, there was a very high tower. It was a place dedicated to the practicing of cultivation. Students could clearly see the sky when standing in that tower. The tower was a good place to practice cultivation because the natural energy that pulsated through it, the qi of heaven and earth, were perfectly interconnected at this location. In the Celestial Academy, there were 3 other towers which were similar to this one. Those studying governmental affairs and those studying to become assassins also had their own towers. As far as the 4th is concerned, it was on the main public square of the academy and it was also the highest one. Lin Feng, the teacher gave us our first task while you were away. We have to practice our cultivation in the tower for a minimum of 3 months. Said Yuan Shan. Lin Feng and the others were standing outside of the cultivation tower. They were all staring at the tower and Yuan Shan said, in simple words, that tower is a perfect place to practice because of its abundance of pure qi coming from heaven and earth to that location. The pure qi of heaven and earth is flowing in what forms an endless stream of energy to that location. This energy is the same as those which flow in the veins of the earth. The inside of the tower is perfect for cultivation because the qi is much denser and flows freely into the tower. Managing to build 4 towers in which there is such a perfect stream of pure qi is really masterful work. Said Lin Feng, who could already feel some of pure qi coming from the ground all around the outside of tower. Besides, if we don't count the palace where the Imperial clan lives, the academy is the place where there is the purest qi. Even the holy courtyard of Xue Yu only has 2 locations in which to build these towers. It is also very difficult to find places where there is pure qi which circulates into the flow. Even the biggest sects usually don't even have any. Actually, this is one of the reasons why the Imperial clan is so strong, because they possess an incredible quantity of pure qi. Lin Feng nodded. Pure qi was a thing cultivator longed for day and night. Even in the Yun Hai sect, there wasn't even a single location which contained the flow of pure qi. It seems like the Celestial Academy really has a scary amount of resources. Thought Lin Feng. Even though the academy wasn't famous because it was very secretive in how it recruited its new students, it seemed like it was more powerful than Lin Feng had ever imagined. The academy required a letter of recommendation which was a difficult thing to obtain. Besides, it trained students for 3 specific functions: commanders, government officials and assassins. In all of these cases, these kinds of functions were extraordinary and were absolutely detached from the daily life of ordinary people. Lin Feng and the others went inside the tower. Inside, there were some rooms and some of them were closed as they were already occupied by other people. Lin Feng could feel the pure qi of the earth penetrating into his feet and invading his entire body. It was quite an intense experience which he almost found scary. He was not cultivating, and the qi was already attempting to penetrate into his body. Let's go upstairs. Hope we can find some space to practice. Maybe we will get stuck on the last floor. Said Yuan Shan. Unfortunately, the best place to practice in the tower was the ground floor. The closer to the ground, the better the quality of qi would be. As you moved higher and higher, it had slightly less earth qi circulating. Obviously, the pure qi of the earth was coming from the ground, so it was also the place where it was the most intense. Lin Feng nodded, and they all walked towards the higher floors. The higher they were getting, the rarer pure qi became. The tower was also getting narrower as they went to higher floors in the tower. Lin Feng looked at a room on the 10th floor. They were extremely small and could probably accommodate only 2 people at once. If a person wanted to move inside these rooms, then it was not convenient as there really was not enough space. There was a young man in black robes was sitting outside the room on the 10th floor and his eyes were closed. What is he doing? Asked Lin Feng, surprised. That young man in black robes was practicing outside of the room even though there was a spare one free. How could he enter in a state of meditation in such an open place? Yuan Shan looked at Lin Feng, stopped walking and said, "You need a purity stone to enter the room. Many people don't have one, and even if they do, they don't want to take it out. They prefer using other people's stones." When Lin Feng heard Yuan Shan, he made a strange face. Use other people's stones? They wait for people to come and use their purity stones and then they consume the pure qi from other people's stones from outside the room. At that moment, the young man in black robes suddenly opened his eyes and coldly looked at Yuan Shan. Since you know how things work, then no need to talk bullshit. If you want to use the room, use it. If you don't feel like it, then don't use it. Get the hell out if you are going to waste my time, coldly said the young man in black robes. He was being extremely rude. Lin Feng and the others were stupefied. Jing Yun then opened her mouth. Yuan Shan, doesn't the academy care about such things? The young man in black robes looked at Jing Yun as if she was an absolute idiot. The academy, care about such things? How ridiculous. Jing Yun, did the Yun High sect care when people fought? Said Lin Feng. Jing Yun slightly nodded. Academies and sects were about getting stronger. The weak were the prey of the strong. Who would care about such things? Get the hell out of here. You're disturbing me while I'm trying to meditate, said the young boy in black robes who was getting impatient. Some of the senior students didn't understand the rules of the academy, which stipulated older students should guide the newer students. Lin Feng, let's leave. If he dares to stay here and wait for other people to come practice, then he must have broken through to at least the third Ling Qi layer. Let's continue onwards, said Yuan Shan to Lin Feng. Meng Qing didn't follow him because Yuan Shan thought they were weak. Since he was wrong, she didn't feel like following him. Lin Feng was motionless. He was standing at the same place. Third Ling Qi layer? Perfect. I was looking for someone of the third Ling Qi layer. Thought Lin Feng, since there's a room here, why not use it? Why should we continue onwards? Said Lin Feng. Everybody was surprised, especially the young man in black robes who had already started meditating. Everybody looked interested in what Lin Feng planned to do all of a sudden. New students overestimate their own abilities. They think that they are extremely strong because they are students that were accepted into the academy, said the young man while looking more and more impatient. Practicing on the highest floors of the tower wasn't a cheap thing to do. They needed to bring at least 3 purity stones with them. If they cultivated there for a month, they needed to bring at least 100 purity stones with them. Lin Feng, don't attack him, said Yuan Shan. They were going to stay there for 3 months, so they would need 200 or 300 purity stones. That was a huge number and they didn't have that many. The best they could do was find a room with a smaller cultivation requirement. No problem, said Lin Feng. Since that guy wanted to take advantage of others, Lin Feng wanted to see if he really had the strength for that. Lin Feng walked towards the entrance of the room. Next to the entrance, there was a hole in the wall. Is it where you have to insert the purity stone? Asked Lin Feng to Yuan Shan. Yuan Shan nodded his head and replied, indeed. It's the same for every room. Inserting a purity stone in that hole then enables you to fully enjoy the functionalities of the room. The veins of the earth fills the entire room with pure qi, making it a perfect place for cultivation. What an intriguing method, thought Lin Feng. He then nodded and said to Yuan Shan, if I practice here for 3 months, how many stones do I need? That should be 3 purity stones of lower quality each day. 3 purity stones of lower quality. Lin Feng smiled wryly. As expected, cultivation required wealth. Purity stones were precious items to cultivators. Only cultivators who had reached the Ling Qi layer could use purity stones to their maximum effect. It was almost impossible to obtain a great number of purity stones. Lin Feng took something out of one of his pockets. Suddenly, an extremely dense and strong pure qi emerged in the atmosphere. Yuan Shan was astonished. Purity stone of medium quality. Lin Feng surprisingly had purity stones of medium quality. Are 3 purity stones of medium quality enough? Asked Lin Feng. Of course. 1 purity stone of medium quality is the equivalent of 100 purity stones of lower quality. Besides, they also produce a much stronger and purer qi, said Yuan Shan while nodding. The young man in black robes had a look filled with greed across his face. That new guy had purity stones of medium quality. He would just easily take them and then use the room himself. End of chapter 128. Chapter 129. Lin Feng's strength. Lin Feng didn't pay attention to the expression of the young man in black robes. He immediately inserted his 3 purity stones of medium quality. At that moment, a thick and intensely powerful pure qi started flowing into the room. It was extremely bright and a magnificent sight. It looked like there was a miniature sun that had awoken in the room. It was similar for everybody else in the other rooms. The young man in black robes had a strange expression on his face, almost evil. He immediately moved towards Lin Feng's cultivation room. There was only Lin Feng in the room, so he wasn't scared. That room was appropriate for only 1 person at a time. If there was more than 1 person in the room, they would disturb each other during cultivation. Yuan Shan moved towards the young man in black robes and blocked the way to Lin Feng's room. If the young man in black robes tried to steal Lin Feng's room, Yuan Shan would have no choice but to attack him. He was intensely staring at the young man in black robes. 3 purity stones of medium quality, that was too valuable of a treasure. Rumbling noises spread through the air. The stone door opened. The young man in black robes was surprised and said to Yuan Shan, "Get the hell out of my way." Suddenly, Yuan Shan was suffocating. As expected, the young man in black robes was at the 3rd Ling Qi layer and was extremely strong, even in comparison with other cultivators of the same level. His pressure was extremely powerful. Yuan Shan knew that he wouldn't be able to compete with him if he was to fight. It was taking everything that he had to stay standing. "Get back," said a voice. At that moment, the temperature outside of Lin Feng's room suddenly dropped. There was an icy cold pressure which filled the air. Yuan Shan was freezing from the qi which penetrated the air around him. Boom! Suddenly, the young man in black robes took a few steps backwards and Lin Feng had appeared next to Yuan Shan. Lin Feng, how powerful! Yuan Shan's pupils shrunk from shock. He wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng would be strong enough to make the young man in black robes retreat backwards. No wonder Lin Feng didn't care about the young man sitting there when he entered the room. The young man in black robes was stupefied as well. He looked at his own hand and saw that it had turned snow white. Frost was covering it and he could barely move it. His hand had been almost frozen solid from that initial encounter. The ice on his hand suddenly cracked and the pieces of ice fell onto the floor. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't look very powerful, but he had surprisingly also broken through to the 3rd Ling Qi layer. "Now, get the hell out of here," said Lin Feng. Lin Feng wasn't aggressive to other people unless they were aggressive to him. Picking his fights carefully would allow him to live a long life and avoid meaninglessly insulting someone. However, one needed strength in this world to be respected and could not back down from a fight. The young man in black robes was furious. Even though Lin Feng had also broken through to the 3rd Ling Qi layer. How could he possibly disrespect him in such a blatant way? Suddenly, huge flames appeared behind the young man and he released his spirit. What astonished everyone is that the flames were filled with a black color inside. "My spirit is a black flame fire spirit," said the young man in black robes coldly. At that moment, his eyes looked like they were on fire and burning brightly, however his gaze was completely cold and bloodthirsty. Black flame fire spirit. Yuan Shan was stupefied. He had never heard of such a fire spirit before. The black flame fire spirit was a fire spirit, but it was clearly a rare fire spirit. The rarer a spirit was, the greater its power would be. Surprisingly, the young man possessed an extremely rare spirit which even Yuan Shan did not know. His spirit coupled with his strength of the 3rd Ling Qi layer, he could be considered as an extremely strong cultivator within the tower. Lin Feng was coldly looking at him. Layers of ice appeared on Lin Feng's body. The air around him was freezing. Black flame fire spirit, how powerful. "Wow, it really looks hot," said Lin Feng and then immediately started walking forwards. Suddenly, an incredible amount of ice started emerging from Lin Feng's body. Everything around him was freezing. Even the air was freezing in place and the atmosphere had become chillingly cold. Yuan Shan, who wasn't far from Lin Feng, was shivering from how cold it had become. His ears were particularly stinging from the coldness in the air. "That's a normal ice spirit," thought Yuan Shan. He then immediately shook his head and said, "Impossible. That's not a normal ice spirit. Ice spirits are not that cold." While the young man in black robes sensed the coldness emanating out of Lin Feng's body, he was also surprised. It was even too cold for his black flame fire spirit, which started fluttering as it was slowly being extinguished by the cold as it grew closer. Usually, fire spirits had the advantage over ice spirits. But Lin Feng's ice spirit was obviously terrifyingly powerful compared to normal ice spirits. Lin Feng thought that his ice spirit was particularly strong because it had been transmitted directly from Meng Qing's qi into him. 8 strikes of desolation. Lin Feng raised one hand and thrust it towards the young man as he carried out his attack. It was still freezing all around him as his hand swiftly moved through the frozen air. "Fire fangs!" shouted the young man in black robes. His spirit moved at the same time as his hands. The young man's attack moved straight towards Lin Feng's cold qi. Suddenly, sword qi started to fill the atmosphere. It was extremely powerful and seemed like it could annihilate the entirety of creation. Lin Feng's cold qi seemed to be sufficient to freeze anyone into a block of ice who moved close to him. The sword qi was so sharp it felt like it would cut anything it encountered into pieces. The cold qi and the sword qi invaded the atmosphere together as a single entity. At that moment, the young man in black robes could feel that he had been marked for death. His entire soul was shaking in fear. How is this possible? He has an ice spirit. How could he release such an insanely strong sword chi, and I can even sense sword force combined with his chi? The young man was shaking from head to toe with complete terror. His knees had already gone weak and he was about to collapse from fear. Lin Feng took another step forward. Get lost, shouted Lin Feng. At that moment, sword chi crashed into the young man's body. A trail of blood flew through the air. The young man in black robes groaned and then collapsed onto the floor. He was looking at Lin Feng with murderous eyes. You dare to injure me? I don't have time to waste talking with you, get out of here. Lin Feng took another step forward. The young man in black robes was terrified. Suddenly, his body emitted a dazzling light and he vanished without leaving a single trace. You'll pay for what you did, said a voice as it retreated. Lin Feng laughed. How could that guy talk such nonsense? Yuan Shan was staring at Lin Feng but remained silent. He was smiling wryly. What a monstrous power. Lin Feng had an ice spirit but used the skill 8 strikes of desolation and released sword chi. How terrifying. He could even use sword force. Even those who had a sword spirit couldn't use sword force to such an incredible level when they had the strength of the Ling Chi layer. Lin Feng was only of the 3rd Ling Chi layer and could control his sword force. Yuan Shan was stunned. Could it be that Lin Feng had several spirits? A sword spirit and an ice spirit must have been used at the same time. Otherwise, how could he have used sword force at the same time as his ice spirit? Yuan Shan had only guessed right about one thing. Lin Feng did possess several spirits. Jing Yun wasn't too surprised. On the way to the Imperial city, she had already witnessed Lin Feng's strength a few times already. Lu Fei wasn't too surprised either. Lin Feng had shown her many times already that he wasn't an ordinary person. His power and his natural abilities were way too terrifying. Lin Feng was about to recall his spirit into his body when suddenly one of the practice rooms opened by itself. An intensely cold air came from the room as the chi flooded to the outside. Damn it, do you not understand the rules? Do you really want to die so badly? Said a voice coming from the room. A silhouette appeared and that person was staring at Lin Feng with incredible killing intent. Lin Feng frowned. A strangely savage smile appeared on his face. He released a piercingly cold chi again as well as sword chi and force. It was oppressing the opponent's body completely. The facial expression of the opponent drastically changed. His heart was pounding, and he was truly scared of the combined energy which was oppressing his body. Let me practice in peace, damn it. Get lost. End of chapter 129. Chapter 130, the 6th floor. Let me practice in peace, damn it. Get lost, said Lin Feng extremely coldly. At that moment, the atmosphere started to drop in temperature once again. The opponent didn't have the same arrogant expression he had when he arrived, he looked scared. Lin Feng was so strong. Damn, what the hell should I do now? Said the opponent as he was insulting himself for having come across someone as strong as Lin Feng. At that moment, many other people in other cultivation rooms had also lost their concentration and their cultivation had been forcefully interrupted. They could feel Lin Feng's piercingly cold chi in the atmosphere. It had invaded the entire tower and was incredibly oppressing. Of course, they were not going to go and see what was going on. They didn't want to invite trouble from someone who could produce such a terrifying chi. Will you get the hell out of here or not? Said Lin Feng extremely aggressively with eyes revealing murderous intentions. The enemy was shaking from head to toe. He glanced at Lin Feng evilly and then went to look for another room within the tower. His current room would have to be left with Lin Feng. The strong can use aggressiveness and strength to scare the weak away. That is the reality of the cultivation world, thought Lin Feng while recalling his spirit back into his body. The young man in black clothes had wanted to steal Lin Feng's room until Lin Feng had shown his real power. He had thought that Lin Feng was weak. The second person had also wanted to seize Lin Feng's room for disturbing his practice, but considering the strength which Lin Feng displayed, the second person had been terrified and had immediately left. He didn't dare to act against someone so strong. That would have been acting recklessly. The path of cultivation was full of unkind people for whom the word compassion meant absolutely nothing. Someone weak and friendly would constantly get bullied. Someone strong and aggressive would be worshipped. The strong were respected and held in high esteem by everybody. Yuan Shan, you can use that room. You should also prepare some of your own purity stones. If the 3 stones I put it are not sufficient to practice for 3 months, then please use your own. Said Lin Feng to Yuan Shan. Yuan Shan nodded. He didn't even try to prevent Lin Feng from leaving the cultivation room to him. He was convinced that relying on his strength, Lin Feng would face no difficulty in finding another room within the tower. Duan Feng and Jing Yun are a bit too weak. If the pure qi is too dense and thick, it will be of no use for them. Lu Fei, go to that room, said Lin Feng, pointing at another room. Duan Feng and Jing Yun didn't say anything, but Lu Fei said, if I use that one, what about you? No need to worry about me. I will find another one better suited for myself. Alright, see you in 3 months, said Lu Fei, and then immediately entered in the cultivation room. Lin Feng then made Duan Feng and Jing Yun follow him so he could help them find a cultivation room. The 11th and the 12th floor were full, so they immediately went up to the 13th floor. He then found 2 rooms which were free for them to practice. From the 11th floor, all the rooms required less purity stones. They only required 1 purity stone of lower quality a day. One of Lin Feng's medium quality purity stones was enough to practice for 3 months. It made Lin Feng sigh with some regret. Cultivation costs were too high, especially when one wanted to cultivate faster. If he hadn't gone to the ancient temple, then he would not have had any purity stones at all. Now, thanks to the ancient temple, he didn't only have low quality stones, but he had medium quality purity stones. The higher a person went within the tower, the less people there were, and thus more and more empty rooms. Those who were willing to train in these rooms were not strong. They usually hadn't even reached the 3rd Ling Qi layer. They were also the students who did not have many purity stones to cultivate. On the contrary, strong cultivators usually had a great deal of purity stones. That kind of cultivator wanted to train on the lowest floors of the tower, and if they were strong enough, then they would even train on the ground floor, directly next to the veins of the earth where the pure qi was extremely thick and dense. This was a vicious circle. Those who were strong rapidly became stronger, while those who were weaker progressed much slower. Lin Feng was the last one left, and he needed a room too. He didn't want to stay at the top of the tower, so he immediately went back down the flight of stairs. He passed by the 10th floor, 9th, and arrived on the 6th floor. He suddenly stopped. There were 8 cultivation rooms on the 6th floor. If a room was occupied, the hole in which the users inserted purity stones would be slightly flashing. Lin Feng walked around and stopped in a corner between 2 occupied rooms. He then sat down and started meditating. A pleasant and refreshing pure qi enveloped his body. The 6th floor wasn't that far from the ground. Even if Lin Feng wasn't in a room, the pure qi which was outside of an occupied room on the 6th floor was still denser than the pure qi in a room on the 10th floor. On the 10th floor, you even had to pay 3 purity stones of lower quality a day to use the room. Not being in a room but sitting outside the occupied rooms on the 6th floor was thus more advantageous to his cultivation. If students could choose a floor as they wished, they would all go to the lowest floors, but it was clear to everyone that those who trained on the first floors were extremely strong. They were the only ones who had the chance to choose the rooms on the first floors. Strength always guaranteed access to the best things in the world. But Lin Feng at this moment was cultivating outside of a room on the 6th floor. He immediately entered in a state of meditation. He didn't think for a second that this was not a normal thing to do. Not long after, some people passed by and saw Lin Feng practicing outside of a cultivation room. They thought that it was really strange thing to do on the lower levels of the tower. They were all very surprised by his actions. What, that? Surprisingly, there's a guy meditating outside of an occupied room on the lower floors. Isn't he scared to constantly be disturbed in his cultivation? Wondered one of the people who saw Lin Feng. Cultivation was about achieving peace and absolute serenity in one's heart. It was possible to efficiently inhale the natural qi of heaven and earth only when that state of mind was reached. Jealous people would not hesitate to try and disturb him. But Lin Feng was sitting outside of an occupied room where many people could pass by. How could that not attract other people's attention? But the strangest thing was that an insanely thick and dense pure qi was rapidly flowing around him and penetrating into his body. Surprisingly, there was nobody disturbing him. That guy, even if he doesn't have purity stones for his own room, he shouldn't practice there like that. What if someone disturbed him at the most crucial moment of his practice? That would be really horrible for him. That guy is so ignorant. If a malicious person attacked him by surprise, the consequences would be disastrous on his future cultivation. Many people were thinking the same thing when they passed by Lin Feng and saw him sat out in the open. Actually, it was forbidden to disturb other people once they were in a room and had already started practicing. The Celestial Academy didn't accept such behavior because they wanted to provide their students with the best cultivation environment. But Lin Feng wasn't inside of a cultivation room at all. Instead, he had decided to study outside of a room on the 6th floor. Doing so was extremely dangerous. However, Lin Feng was sitting next to a cultivation room. Suddenly, the pure qi in the room next to Lin Feng was becoming weaker and weaker. Some people noticed this and were watching on with dazed expressions. That probably meant that that person's time had elapsed. Somebody was probably going to come out and see Lin Feng sat there. At the same time, Lin Feng opened his eyes. The pure qi surrounding him had progressively stopped being absorbed into his body. He looked at the door of room next to him and stood up. The crowd was surprised. They had just understood why Lin Feng had been sitting outside of the occupied room. He was not planning to stay outside of a room for a longer period while cultivating. He was just waiting for a room to be free. But was Lin Feng going to get it? At that moment, many people started walking towards that room with determined looks on their faces. They understandably all wanted to have access to a room on the 6th floor of the tower. End of chapter 130. Hope you guys enjoy the chapters, and a thumbs up is appreciated.